Grab a hot drink and turn up the volume. It's time for Morning Jolt with Sister Ignatia. Once a month, Kyle heads over to Fortezza Coffee for a chat with coffee aficionado Sister Ignatia Henneberry from the Sisters of St. Francis of Perpetual Adoration. Wake up!
Welcome to Morning Jolt with Sister Ignatia Henneberry. I am Kyle Hyman here with Sister. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
I think you've got a really good topic for us today.
I hope so. I think it's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You work with college students a lot.
I do.
And so...
all day.
What would be some of the hot button topics that students want to bring up with you? If you had to make a top list?
Yeah. If I had to pick number one probably number one, number two would probably be homosexuality and transgender issues, I would say. Yeah. Students
struggling with that themselves or struggling with the church's teaching as it relates to others?
Probably most of the students that come to me would be the latter. So the ones that are struggling with that. But then I do meet quite a few students on campus that maybe aren't within the fold of the church, but yet experience same-sex attraction or gender dysphoria or anything. There's a lot of that being experienced on campus. They might just not be in the inner circle of who's hanging out in campus ministry, but
let's go talk to Sister about
let's
this.
go talk to Sister. Yeah.
So what are some things, I guess maybe just starting with how do you approach the topic when it comes up?
Yeah, I guess I try to make some differentiations, because there's the macro problem or the macro issue of in society and the ideology of it in philosophy, but then usually behind that and more important than that is the individual, the person. So,
right.
So I guess I try to, I don't know, before we ever answer the logic of their argument or something like that, I want to hear why do they feel this way? Because our students, they're passionate about it. They're not just why? What happened?
It's not who cares. It's
right.
I care about this person.
Right.
And this is how I support him or her.
Exactly. So even having students that might struggle with same-sex attraction or just fully embrace that lifestyle, I want to know their life story, because the church doesn't teach condemnation, and that's a lot of what they've heard and what they assume. And then that gets projected onto who God is, which is not true. So one student, I remember talking to her, and we didn't, I knew that she was living a homosexual lifestyle, but we didn't talk about it because I wasn't convinced that she knew Jesus. So we have to start there. And then I remember early on in our friendship, bringing up talk to me about your family. What was your dad around? And it came out, she was oh, I know where you're going with that. He's I'm fine. He's whatever. And then it took 2 to 3 years for us to then have another conversation about actually how much pain her father caused her in her life. So having a same-sex attraction can't be deduced to one issue in your life.
Sure.
But yeah, I want to talk about how have you been hurt as a person? What's more important, and I think precedes the rationality of fighting for same-sex attraction or homosexual marriage or that sort of thing. So I guess I'd start there. And Matt Fradd has a really good analogy for apologetics, which I think applies. He says apologetics is kind of we're in this really multi-story house within a courtyard. The top level is kind of the Catholic faith. Maybe the level down below is Christianity. You're in the house that's deism. The courtyard's atheism or something,
Okay.
And we're often on the top level shouting down to people that are in the courtyard. What good is that doing?
Right.
We have to go down to the courtyard, understand them, and then invite them into the house. We have to start there. So I think it's similar for people that espouse a homosexual lifestyle or ideology, that if I'm not convinced that they even know who Jesus is, how are they ever going to accept the message of authentic love that the church has to offer? They're not there. Yeah, start at the right place, I guess.
There's a couple things I'm thinking about here. One is that I think a lot of times as Catholics and Catholic media, I think we're guilty of this, is talking about them as you were talking about this kind of generic thing and reducing. Actually, I think it's kind of dehumanizing.
Oh, yeah.
That we're not talking about a person anymore. We're talking about a group of people that are not like us.
Right. Yeah.
Versus your students and people that might feel like they need to support the cause of whether it be transgenderism or homosexuality. It's because they care about a person.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And so how can we get back to that as Catholics? Like, okay, let's forget about the agenda for a minute and think about the person.
Yeah.
And I love it that you're doing that. Like, all right, I'm not here to convert you, to change you. Like, I'm here to love you.
Right.
You're a person.
Yeah.
You have struggles. I've got struggles. You've got a past. I've got a past. You know, you've been hurt. I've been hurt. Like, that doesn't need to define us as people.
Right.
We're loved by God, and that's what defines us.
Yeah. One of my sisters, we were talking about this, and she's like, yeah, we don't have to like worry about the Catholic Church changing its position on same-sex marriage. Like, it's not going to happen. So like, it's not up to me to come up with the best argument. Like, Jesus isn't calling me to do that.
Yeah.
He's calling me to love. And that's the only thing that changes any heart is love. So yeah, it's good to be informed, but like, I don't have to get all like angry about it.
The other thing about your analogy is, besides the fact that we might be yelling from the top floor into the courtyard, which is not a great way to talk to somebody. Like,
right.
But also, I think a lot of times they're hearing us yell at each other, and they're overhearing that conversation. And the conversation that we might have on the third floor of a house.
Yeah.
I mean, the same thing, like the conversation I might have with my wife is a different one than I would have with my son.
Right.
Right? There's things that he isn't ready to hear yet.
Right.
But are true.
Right. Exactly.
And so realizing those different tiers of understanding and readiness.
Yes.
And approaching somebody with the right mindset.
Yeah, because I think a lot of the times that they've heard all like what the church says from either people that might be just like angry or like those people that have talked to them about maybe things that are true but not applying to them.
Right.
And at least in my experience, it's been like received well. That like, oh, okay, like when they hear that I consider homosexual relationships acts or whatever, however you want to talk about it. There's similar things going on there as issues of masturbation and premarital sex. Like, yeah, it's not like it's, we're going to talk about them over here because that's...
I have a tendency to do this. If I can't relate to the struggle, then I assume that I'm better than them. Or like there's something more wrong about that sin because I don't struggle with that sin.
Yeah.
Because I can't relate to it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's part of it.
Maybe. Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. I mean,
so like, oh, what is your problem? Why do you struggle with that sin? I don't struggle with that sin.
Why is that so hard? Like, yeah, we don't know.
But I struggle with different sins.
Yeah.
Like, not to say that we aren't all on this boat together.
Right.
Like, trying to get somewhere.
Yeah, that was another thing of like, not to like seek out, I guess, an unhealthy environment necessarily, but like how many of us Catholics have good friends that are struggling with same-sex attraction or living a homosexual lifestyle. Like, why aren't we befriending them? Why aren't we seeking them out? Why aren't we asking them about their life? So I think
there's a bunch of reasons. One, we avoid them.
Yeah.
Two, we drive them away.
Yes.
They don't want to be around us.
Right.
Or they are struggling with that and they are our friends, but they're not going to ever tell us because we're going to chastise them or something like that.
Yeah. They're afraid. Yeah.
So it all has to do with our behavior, basically. That's why you don't have any friends that are struggling with.
Well put.
With
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
So how do we change that? How do we fix it?
Oh, I don't know. So like thinking of like my students, like, yeah, I know this is an issue for them. Our first conversation or something, I'm not bringing it up. Like I don't need to have them feel like I need to diagnose them and fix their ideological problem. Like that's, it's not like forgetting about it, but yeah, you have to see the person. So like really focusing on seeing who the person is that we, like we say that everyone who supports gay marriage and something like reduces the person to this like small piece of, and like makes their identity. But like we do the same thing if we've just only focus on that.
Right.
And instead of allowing that person to experience being loved, and that like their identity is received. So like this friend of mine, I'm going to be here no matter what. I think of you the same as I ever would.
Yeah.
I love you. You are who you are. They don't have to create who they are for me. Because that's like a lot of what the issues surrounded around is that, okay, I've established this as my identity, either as like transgender or homosexuality. Like this is my identity. So I have to fight for that. And you have to affirm that. But like, I'm affirming you without all that. Like, you don't need to prove anything to me.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big thing that's being lost is identity as something that's received. So yeah, I guess just being an instrument of that to other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What kind of a message would you have for somebody listening that is struggling with that, and whether they've ever been public about it or are just really struggling privately about it? What's your hopes and dreams and message for them?
Oh man. Yeah, I guess I would just say they're in front of me that you are loved, and the things that have been hurtful that have been said to you either by people in the church, that I'm sorry. That we don't choose how we feel sometimes. We can't. And that you are suffering. Like, I don't know, I think, yeah, in a sense, like I have to see that for what it is and affirm that it is a suffering. Yeah, and I would want to understand you in your suffering and you for, why you feel what you feel and what's going on. And then probably the second thing that I would suspect, again, the person's not here, but I would suspect the biggest issue in your life is believing in true, authentic, life-giving love that's self-sacrificial. Like, I would suspect that, you haven't experienced this in your life. It hasn't been shown to you. Your parents didn't live this out. So now something that might look like love is love for you. And that makes sense to me. In the world that we live in, like, that makes sense to me. That's also not your fault that no one showed you what love is. So that would be my hope, is that like you can understand and live and experience true love as God wanted you to be loved. And go from there. It's a lot.
All right. Well, thank you so much, sister. We are out of time, but how was did you do the cortada?
Yeah, it's my classic.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
All right. Thank you so much, sister.
Thanks, Kyle. See ya. Wake up!